KMC HD3 Detroit, KMPS HD3 Seattle, WBMX HD3 Boston.
And on AOL Radio and Yahoo Launchcast. Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com. Believe.
Are alien abductions real? What is it like to be abducted? What do they want from us?
Hello there, and welcome to the very special 322nd edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. And those rather chilling questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. So today we have three very special guests, and probably three of the world's greatest experts on alien abductions because they have actually had the experience.
Now, for our roundtable discussion this evening, we have in alphabetical order Thom Reed, Whitley Streiber, and Travis Walton, who will be a little bit late. He's joining us by telephone, and we'll try to get him in on the action during the next break. We'll let them tell their own stories, but just some brief introductions. Thom Reed is familiar to our CBS and Boston Providence listeners from shows 302 and 303, which he did with us in December. Both of those are available on our free podcast page, of course, at BehindTheParanormal.com. Tom's website is tomreed.info. .info, and the Reed is R-E-E-D. Whitley Streiber needs no introduction, a prolific author, broadcaster, and media personality, and since his abduction and contact experiences, something of a spiritual leader and social conscience as well, along with his wife Anne. Their website, www.unknowncountry.com. His 1985 experience is the subject of the movie Communion. Travis Walton, who, as I say, will be joining us shortly, I hope, is a logger by trade, but also an author and speaker. His 1975 abduction is considered one of the best documented in history. His experience is documented in the movie Fire in the Sky, and his website is traviswalton.com.
So all three cases have their debunkers, as does everything paranormal.
Including us.
Yep. But this evening we want to get into the cases themselves and what they have meant for those three very different men and their families. And maybe get into the broader implications of all this. So, Whitley and Travis, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal, when Travis gets here. And Tom, welcome back.
Thank you.
So, we'll ask each other to present, or we'll ask you to each present your abduction experience as best as you can in 5 minutes. So, let's see. Who should we start with first? Tom,
let's go alphabetically.
Yeah, Tom, what happened to you?
Well, what took place with our family actually stems back to 1954, which obviously was before I was born. But the 60s in Sheffield, Massachusetts, my brother and I, my family had a horse farm there, and my brother and I had numerous accounts with a craft that was on our property. And my brother and I remember it vividly. In short, we do remember an awful lot of what took place. My brother was also club-footed, and there seemed to be an attention to his leg. And I'd say 1969 actually was one of out of those three, was the one that was by far the most horrific for us. We were in a station wagon, and we were coming back from a horse show. And my grandmother and my mother was driving the car. My brother and I were there as well. And the car came to stall off of the right side of the road. We were immediately, our surroundings were immediately changed. We were in a craft that was absolutely enormous. It was what looked to me to be like a large hangar. We were separated. My mother and brother were, from what they tell me, were in the same room. My grandmother separated completely as I was. And I was taken into down a hallway. Actually, this time we were handled differently. It was rough, militant, very orchestrated. I was grabbed by my left arm and taken down a hall into what teed off into another room. And at that point, there were more than one type of being, if you will, and I was actually leaning up more against the table. There were two that were almost resembled something more like an insect type of being, if you will. I don't subscribe to terminology, but that's what it looked like. And I ran out of a doorway, if you will, off to the right side, which led into a large intersecting hallway, which was huge. It was probably the size of a 3-lane highway on each end, and it kind of joined the middle, making it about the size of a basketball court, if you can picture that. And without getting into too much detail, we were brought back, or I found myself back in a station wagon behind the driver's seat. My mother was actually in the passenger seat now, even though she had been driving. My brother was beside me where he was. My grandmother was in the middle of the road. That was pretty much it for the 60s. And, of course, in 2009, with that case in Brownsburg involving my brother, which where they found identified radiation, readings were there. Magnetic fields were spinning a compass from over a foot away from the vehicle. There was, of course, my brother has seen a doctor for some of the medical issues, and of course that case has gotten a lot of attention, which fueled this investigation and opening up some of the past records from us. And of course, again, my father was in politics, and for one of the reasons that we never really talked about this early on, but since his passing in 2005, we've decided to come forward with it.
Okay.
So, Whitley, on to you. Why don't you share your story?
Well, my story is actually pretty different. In many ways, this story sounds a lot more interesting. What happened to me was, first of all, it was like him. It was very abrupt. I heard a lot of noise around me, sleeping in the dead of night of December the 26th, 1985. It was probably the morning of the 27th by then. And I woke up and opened my eyes, and I was not in my bed. And I kept trying to make the bed come up around me to wake up, because I felt like I was it was a dream of some sort. It was very, very odd. I was in a little round room, and then these peculiar, big-eyed things started peering at me, and when I could not make the room materialize, it became, I kind of melted down, and I began hearing this voice, this sort of electronic voice, say in a super, super mild tone, "What can we do to help you stop screaming?" and just repeating this. Meanwhile, I was physically, forcibly raped, and a needle was thrust into the side of my head by these two different types of these peculiar creatures. And I blacked out. And I must have, because I don't remember much of what happened after that. But when I woke up in the morning, I was really very confused. At first, I thought there had been an owl had gotten into the house. But obviously, that wasn't the case. It was winter, and there was no owl. It could have gotten in. The place was all closed up, and certainly there would have been a ruckus, and my wife remembered nothing. The night had been quiet as far as she was concerned. I spent the day rather bothered by all of this, and then as the sun set and it got dark, I thought to myself, there must have been an owl at the window, because I remember these eyes too clearly. This was no dream. And I went upstairs, and I can remember the chill of fear I felt as the sun was going down, and I looked out the window to the snow-covered roof and saw it was completely untouched by no owl had been at the window. Obviously, it hadn't snowed during the day, so... And what was so chilling to me was not the idea that I might have been abducted by aliens. That never even crossed my mind. I would have just scoffed at that. And what was chilling was that I had a memory that I couldn't explain. And I didn't, I wasn't in pain then. But the next day, while I was sitting and writing, working, being a writer, I felt pain in my rectum and to the point where I could no longer sit down. And I had a what looked like a spider bite on the side of my head. And I was so disturbed by this, I just couldn't imagine what had happened to me. Then I began to remember that I had seen an old friend in among these beings, these creatures that I had around me, and he had been a Central Intelligence Agency official. And a few years previously, I had written a book called War Day that had it had been supported by Ted Kennedy, and it had resulted in the torpedoing of a pet project of Brent Scowcroft's to harden industrials, use FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration, to harden industrial sites against limited nuclear war, against nuclear blasts. And I had been called about 6 months before that by a staffer from Kennedy's office and warned that Scowcroft was on the warpath and he was a real nasty man, and I better watch out. And I said, what do you think? What are you talking about? I mean, it's a free country. I have a right to say what I want to say. And he said, well, I know that, but, or rather she was a woman, you might be he's liable to get one of these political tax audits or something. That's why we're warning you. And just get a tax lawyer if that happens, and as soon as they see that, they'll back off. So I thought nothing more of it. But then subsequently I had read about the MK Ultra project, which was then very much in the news, and the use of controlled substances to drive people crazy, et cetera, and so forth. And the plutonium experiments were coming into the news then, and I knew the government was well capable of doing awful things to people. And I thought, could it have been Scowcroft who screwed me up with drugs? Because this other fellow who was there was we were school friends, but he was more an enemy than a friend, and he's been in the CIA. So, and by this time it was clear that something was very wrong. I had already, this is now about 5 days later, I had been to the doctor, and the doctor had told me quite frankly that I had been raped and that I was injured rectally. And so, obviously, I wasn't dealing with any kind of a dream. And he said the little mark on the side of my head looked like a spider bite. It was inconsequential as far as he was concerned. I told him what I remembered, and he was the first person to say, it sounds like you saying you were taken aboard a flying saucer by little men. And I said, holy God, Tom, it does.
Well, on that note, I'll have to interrupt you, Whitley. I'm sorry, we have a break coming up. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on CBS News Sky Radio at newskyradio.com. Our guests, Whitley Streiber and Thom Reed, will be back shortly to talk about their abduction experiences further. We'll get into some discussion, and hopefully we'll be able to raise Travis Walton during the break as well, so please stay with us.
So what are you thankful for? The I'm Thankful Network explores the positive. Join host Sue Lundquist Tuesdays at noon Eastern Time. Empowering women, empowering lives. The I'm Thankful Network on New Sky Radio. Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, The Dr. Pat Show is alive with a distinctive blend of interviews with a mix of uplifting and intelligent news, educational and practical information. Get in the know. Following Dr. Pat, join host Laura Lee for Laura Lee's Spirit Salon. Contact your dearly departed, spirit guides, and angels to find answers, closure, guidance, insight, revelations, and prophecy regarding matters of the heart by contacting the other side through acclaimed medium Laura Lee. You are not alone. Batter up. Life's a game. Win. Call and get advice from today's top coaches that are here to help you win the game of life. The Coach Me Network is live starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Call in early. The lines are hot. 248-545-7685. Instant feedback at newskyradio.com. New Sky Radio. newskyradio.com. New horizons, no boundaries. Powered by CBS, Yahoo, and radio.com.
Enlighten, empower, enrich. This is CBS Radio's The New Sky. New horizons, no boundaries.
New Sky Radio. NewSkyRadio.com and Psychic Radio, PsychicOnAir.com. Powered by CBS Radio. AOL and Yahoo is unlike any talk radio station, with a mission to improve the world one listener at a time. This is where you can be the star of your own show. Our listeners are truly unique, truly interactive, and passionate about their world, the sky, and Psychic Radio listeners genuinely care about the environment, social justice, their personal health, and raising people up to live their best life every day. Our motto is New Horizons, No Boundaries. New Age views, life coaching, psychic analysis, alternative medicine, and cutting-edge mind, body, and spirit shows can all be found on the Sky and Psychic Radio. Perhaps you have what it takes to join our broadcast family. An open mind, a great idea, and a passion for enriching lives. Check out all the exciting details by clicking the microphone on our homepage at newskyradio.com or give Lisa Rodman a call at 248-546-9600 to learn just how affordable it can be to host a show.
Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com.
And welcome back. Our guests, of course, this evening on the subject of alien abductions and the experience thereof are Thom Reed and Whitley Streiber, very well-known names. Certainly Whitley is, and Thom is becoming very well-known, family abduction case. And also Travis Walton, who we hope will be able to join us a little later, running a little late today. But when we took the break, Whitley was in the midst of discussing his particular experience. So please continue where you left off.
Well, okay, let me wind up with what happened in the end. I started trying to get a hold of the guy who had been in the CIA because I figured by that time I was darn sure I had been screwed with, basically, by somebody who had come and filled me full of drugs and tried to make me think I was abducted by aliens. Because by then I was well aware of this thing and this whole deal. I had talked to Bud Hopkins, and so without telling anybody like Bud Hopkins anything about it, I was pursuing this angle, and the psychiatrist involved was supportive of this because he thought it was a criminal act too. He said, if you've been raped and you have, no matter how crazy the memories are, there's a crime that's been committed. And he was a forensic specialist, a forensic hypnotist. He was very good at helping people who had traumatic memories to sort them out. So I finally tracked the guy down. And here was where it got weird, very weird. He had been dead since the previous March. He was dead when it happened.
Well, that's interesting.
And I talked to him. He was sitting right there. And now that began what has turned out to be a years-long odyssey. And in the new book, Solving the Communion Enigma, I bring out the fact that the close encounter experience and encounters with the dead are linked profoundly.
Tell us about it.
Because what happened was after we got communion out, my wife, we started getting letters just unbelievably. Thousands and thousands, sometimes 500 or 1,000 in a day. And they were being dragged into the house by postal workers in gigantic bags. And my wife and a lady we hired to help us, Lori Barnes, started reading and cataloging all the letters, and it wasn't long before we discovered that people, very as often as not, when they're having a close encounter of the third kind, they see also ghosts and their own dead, but not as ghosts, as physical beings. And almost inevitably, these people say, I'm okay, or we're okay. And then later, when we began to have groups of people out at our cabin, it was always a mixed bag. When the visitors would show up, say, in the living room, when there were 3 or 4 people, 5 people sleeping on cots there, or more accurately, lying on cots waiting for something to happen, because, who would sleep under those circumstances? And in the basement, another couple, and the visitors showed up in the living room with all these people as witnesses, and in the basement, the couple who were asleep woke up to find an old friend of theirs who died in the Mexico City earthquake of '83 standing at the foot of the bed looking perfectly normal in clothes she used to wear when she was alive, saying, I just want to let you know I'm all right. So,
well, there we are.
So, it's a whole new dimension to this thing. There's something going on that we really don't understand.
Well, you couldn't have put it better than we could have, because since 2005, especially since I started working with Ben, I've been working in primarily ghost research for 42 years since I was in the seminary. And it has led to precisely what you've just described. Although we usually start from the other end, people say they're seeing ghosts, and we end up, we spend years on cases. We don't swoop in and swoop out with all silly gadgets, and our approach and our theory are entirely different from what you see on the pop TV shows. And we end up half the time with grays and UFO sightings.
Sometimes Bigfoot.
Sometimes Bigfoot.
You were doing ghost research in a seminary. Were you a Jesuit or what?
No, I was working with one of the Jesuits. Actually, I got thrown out of the seminary for my paranormal work about a year before ordination. It's rather a long story. That most of the
it's always a long story when it comes to seminary.
Anyway, that was 30-odd years ago, but anyway, perhaps we can get to that another time. The listeners are familiar, but as I guess we're to be proceeding with the two of us here, so why don't we just sort of begin with our questions? Thank you, Whitley. That was absolutely fascinating. We realize that you might not be familiar with all the intimate details of each other's cases, you and Tom, but from what you have heard and what you know, what do the other two cases have in common that you can see sort of at this glance?
It's high strangeness.
Yeah, as our friend Linda would say.
Linda now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's about all you can say. Tom?
Well, as far as Travis and I go, we've been on the, we've become fairly friendly and gone over a lot of notes and kind of gone down memory lane a few times. And with respect to his case and mine, which is Whitney's, I think, is a little bit different. Although he did mention, he did touch on marks on his skin. I think something behind your ear, I believe.
Yeah.
My brother has that. It almost looks like a snake bite. And he had two identical ones on his chest, just below his rib cage. And that is something that he noticed in 2009 and has been treated for, actually. As far as similarities, I mean, Travis and I we do remember something very real, very forceful, powerful. There was radiation in both our cases. There was, at least in our case, magnetic fields were there as well. There were multiple witnesses to it, the descriptions of the craft and the way it was lit up. There were some similarities. I've referenced something that looked like a black rock. I think the last time I was on, I talked about that a little bit, and he referred to it as a spear. So there are some similarities in our case, although there's also a lot, of differences as well. But it would seem that these marks are of interest. I don't know, again, Whitney, I don't know what your marks look like, but these were almost shaped like small cones, almost like a sugar cone, and they were hardened, and they were actually right behind the right ear, and two identical ones in his chest. So, with that said, that's really all I can say without Travis here.
Yeah. Well, I just to make a note of you gentlemen, and I think I've talked with Tom about this before, but Bud Hopkins and I once sat down, and he had an album, which maybe if you've seen it, I don't know, but he had an album of photographs of physical the physical results or wounds that had resulted from what were perceived to have been abduction experiences. And the first thing that struck me was that they were exactly the same in some cases, not all, but as I'd run into in poltergeist cases where there had been physical abuse of certain victims of that. And he and I were planning to get further into that, perhaps to look for more commonalities between those realms when, of course, he began to, his illness began to get the best of him, unfortunately. But so just, again, showing that there are connections here, absolutely. Okay, we'll move on to our next question here. I guess, Ben, you had one?
Okay, so what strikes each of you as different from the other's cases? And Tom, let's start with you.
Well, I got to go back with Travis, being I only understand his case. Not as familiar with Whitney's, I'm sorry. But our case would seemingly be more orchestrated and nurtured in appearance, and whereas his seemed to be more of a wrong place at the wrong time. although, again, with Whitney, this is the first time I've actually had an opportunity to listen or speak with him. So it would seem that, Travis and I seem to be more maybe physical and less spiritual in some respects, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, as I understand Travis's story, they were driving. He was a logger by trade. He and several others were driving through the woods at night, and was it Arizona, I believe? And they happened to see a craft or a big light, and Travis was apparently without fear and simply walked right up to the thing, and bingo, that was the end of that. And for a few days, and then he would have to fill in the rest of the story himself. So that essentially was quite different from your situation, Tom, and certainly from yours, Whitley.
Yeah, it was different. Mine wasn't. I wouldn't say it was spiritual at all. Not at first. I mean, that was as physical as it gets. You don't get raped by spiritual beings. At least I wouldn't expect that. Maybe baddies. It was a very physical experience, and it involved the removal of sexual material. The reason I was raped was mechanical. They were introduced a device into me called an electrostimulator, which was in those days still used in cases of sexual dysfunction where men couldn't get erections, and it stimulates a nerve under there and that sends electrical impulses and causes you to become sexually, because you have an erection. And they did that to me. And, of course, I had no idea what was going on. And in the hypnosis session, you can hear me saying, I don't know why that's happening, because, there's no emotional content in the experience that would suggest I might become sexually interested. Let me put it that way. Far from it. And yet it was happening, and I was very confused by it. And the next thing I knew, they had removed sexual material from my body. So it was an awful experience. It was ghastly, and it was, as I say, very physical. Nobody was chanting. Mm-hmm. So maybe later there were some spiritual elements that entered into it that I brought, but earlier on that night, that was pure hell. Yeah.
All right. Well, certainly significant differences. We're coming up on another break here. Okay, we have 3 minutes, so I'm going to ask the next question. Who or what do you feel actually abducted you? Aliens from another planet, time travelers, multidimensional creatures, demons, something we have no real conception of, all of the above, none of the above? Tom?
Well, our family pretty much maintains, for lack of a better word, perhaps a distant ancestor of ours. We feel that whoever this was or whatever they were, and again, I don't subscribe to terminology, but it would seem that they played a substantial part with respect to our planet as a whole, and pretty much been here the whole time. And I say that because there seems to be, or obviously in our case, at least in tight circles, that it was genetic and there was gene tampering, we believe, and of course, depending on how much time we have, you've seen the reports on my child, and sure. And so it would seem to me that if of course the RH negative factor has come up in conversations, and whether or not there is or isn't something significant to that, either way, it definitely looked and felt to us that it was genetic, and if that's the case, then it would only make sense that if there was an interest in us, then there should be a connection somehow. So that's where we pretty much have come to the determination that we have that it's probably some actual connection to them.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, Whitley, I'll have to interrupt you in a second, but why don't you begin?
Could you repeat the question, if you don't mind?
Excuse me, certainly. Just who or what do you feel actually abducted you? Aliens, time travelers, multidimensional, demons, or whatever.
Well, I just have. I don't know. I've never understood exactly what they are. I do think, though, whatever they are, they come in different configurations, and I've seen at least 3 or 4 different types, and where they're from sort of doesn't even interest me much. It's what they do that I'm concerned with, and what their motives are. I hear people say they're from this star system or that star system. Nobody really knows anything about that. I hear people say, well, they're time travelers or interdimensional beings and whatever. No one knows anything about that. And that not only that, we can't find out. I don't think there's any way for us to find out. The thing has a very peculiar quality of seeming extremely physical, but at the same time bleeding off into realms of the metaphysical and paranormal in ways that are very unexpected. And so if they are physical beings from some other part of this universe, then they are in a very different state than we are, and the physics of life for them unfold differently than they do for us. That would be my best answer, probably.
Well, we recognize that from our work. It's difficult to maybe to grasp, but I believe we are coming up on a break here. So we will be right back, and stay with us. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on CBS New Sky Radio and newskyradio.com. Be right back.
Take CBS Radio The Sky with you wherever you go. Be sure to download the radio.com app today from your mobile marketplace. And when you really want to know more, be sure to visit newskyradio.com. Get in deep with exclusive articles and Sky News. Get your weekly horoscope and the inside scoop on host events. Radio.com and newskyradio.com. Stay connected.
Are open wide. By the way, I made it through the day. I watched the world outside. By the way, I'm leaving out today. I just saw Haley's comet away. Said, why you always running in place? Even the man in the moon disappeared. Somewhere in the stratosphere. Tell my mother, tell my father, I've done the best I can to make them realize this is my life. I hope they understand. I'm not angry, I'm just saying, sometimes goodbye is a second chance. Please don't cry one tear for me. I'm not afraid of what I have to say. This is my one and only voice, so listen folks, it's only for today. I just saw Haley's comet away. Said, why you always running in place? Even the man in the moon disappeared. Somewhere in the stratosphere. Tell my mother, tell my father, I've done the best I can to make
Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com. Believe.
And we're back on the subject of alien abductions and the experience of such a terrible conception or whatever. And certainly we have Whitley Streiber with us this evening and Thom Reed. And I'm afraid that Travis Walton appears not to have been able to join us schedule-wise. Perhaps we can schedule some other show with him. But we've been going through the experiences of these two gentlemen, and we've touched upon the next question already, which is, what is the big picture here? What do you feel are the ultimate motives, or do we have any way of knowing that? And we'll start with Thom.
Again, our case and what is the forefront of a collected effort here in our family, we're pretty solid on the fact that it has to do with genes, genetics. Perhaps there's a purpose trying to open up additional senses or receptors within or looking for that in other species to develop their own. It just seems to be very scientifically based and with a focus on certain human bodies and or needs.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I really wouldn't know.
Well, I want to get into your son as well too as we go to. But Whitley, what you already began to address this subject. What do we have any idea what the big picture is here?
Yeah, I think that it's very clear that change is on the agenda, and for a particular reason. We have found that there is a certain type of experience that actually physically alters the brain. In the last September's issue of Psychological Science magazine, there was a really interesting paper presented about how surrealistic experiences quite literally make you smarter. They cause synaptic changes in the left brain. And if you look at this whole experience, if you step back from it and look not only at the close encounters and the abductions, but also at the UFO sightings and all of the other strange manifestations that are associated with it, the seeming impossibility of what many people experience of the dead being present with the visitors, and some of those stories are extraordinary and heartrending.
Yes.
All of this taken together, it's a massive little bundle of questions that can't be answered, but can't be turned away from either by anybody who first takes a look at them. You can't ever turn away once you take a look at this. So I think that changing the brain, literally making us smarter, is part of the agenda. And what's interesting about that is changes like that become part of your genetics, and they are transmitted down generations. So people who always say, well, maybe they were here in the distant past changing us genetically, they're here now changing us genetically.
Well, this of course, leads right into the next question, which...
So how have these experiences changed you? And let's start with Thom.
Well, personally, from a perspective of being a child, it certainly stripped us of any sense of normalcy and that Norman Rockwell upbringing we would have had. And it's extremely hard to cope with. It's painfully damaging at first, and you obviously have to come to terms with it. But at the same time, I think Whitney hit it on the head a minute ago, and that's certainly, and you know where I'm going with this, that even though it appears to have been tragic in a lot of ways, and it's difficult to accept and talk about and find ways to accept it, you do see a change, and certainly in our family and with Chance, my son. So, yes, there has been some positives come from it, I guess. We have some remarkable advancements in my son's abilities, which have been documented with PhDs in schools and so on and so forth.
Yeah, why don't you take a second and tell us about that, if you would.
My son has been scoring off the charts ever since first or second grade. He has had some remarkable foresight. He is unbelievable when it comes to numbers and math. He was doing high school mathematics when he was in third or fourth grade. He has tested at the Knoxville Hypnosis Center a series of tests. He was tested with different schools, Miami Children's Hospital, you name it. And the reason his nickname is Chance is because he has, for a very long time, and I'm going to go back maybe 7 or 8 years, his average scoring, if you will, when tested, is twice the level of Chance. So even with something common that your listeners would recognize, maybe like Xenocards, the average on that is 16%, whereas he comes up with 39. There was one time he came up with 61% on Xenocards.
That's remarkable. Wow.
But he also dropped 4 in a row and then landed his last one. That was actually at a convention center in Lexington. But he does this pretty much at will, and it's not something that's hidden. I mean, there's an awful lot of people that have seen this firsthand, including the schools and conventions and so on and so forth. There's no trick to it. You take numbers. He's better with numbers than he is with shapes, as long as the numbers resemble shapes. He will miss a 6 and a 9 or a 1 and a 7 sometimes because he kind of sees things in the form of a shape, but as long as he looks at it as a calculation, he does much better with it.
So the suggestion here is that there was perhaps some genetic manipulation as part of all this that occurred in your family situation?
We certainly can't attest to it because we certainly wouldn't know how he would be otherwise, but I certainly know the answer for it. I mean, nobody else in our family can really do that except for my son's youngest. He also has, but he's also much younger than my son, so we need to see what happens with him. But he is also extremely, he plays, he's been beating adults in chess in second grade. So just for watching him, as far as where it goes, we don't know. But there is something to it, which is exactly what Whitney was talking about a moment ago. So this really, there's really a connection with what he said and what we're seeing.
Has there been any DNA testing of any kind? Or?
Not DNA testing. He is our Rh negative, if that means anything.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, that's been a theme. All right. Okay, well, Whitley, what ultimately has this done to your life?
Well, it's completely changed my life. I was living the life of a writer before this, in with a conventional level of interest in my work and respect for my work in some circles, and I got reviewed, and I was an accepted part of the community. But once I published Communion, which, of course, I never expected the book to go berserk like it did, I became a pariah. I haven't been reviewed, in my knowledge, in the New York Times since then. And when my latest book, Solving the Communion Enigma, came out, a work in 10 years in the writing, nobody cared. It wasn't reviewed anywhere. The Associated Press published a review of it, and that was basically it. None of the regular reviewing media even acknowledged its existence. No television or radio programs, major television or radio programs, except Coast to Coast AM and Mancow, both of whom I know and on their shows a lot.
Mancow's experience and a half.
Well, no, I like Mancow.
I like him too. I just
interesting.
Make sure I get a good night's sleep before I talk to him.
He's a very interesting guy.
Yeah,
anyway, all of that is gone, and the reason it's gone is that as this experience has broadened and deepened, it has disappeared from the media because it's concealed. In other words, there's no closure. I announced A Close Encounter of the Third Kind in a book that people thought were pretty compelling some years ago, and then there are a couple of follow-on books, but nothing ever says, okay, they've landed, now we're going to the White House, we've got plans for a starship, etc. It doesn't follow that conventional trajectory. It follows another trajectory, and that trajectory is not media-friendly. So, yeah, it hurt me a lot. It hurt me financially. I went broke eventually. I lost the cabin in upstate New York where this happened. I had the experience of being criticized for being called a charlatan and a guy who had used this to make a lot of money while I was actually going bankrupt.
Yeah, I hear you. No, I've been there too.
It was hard.
Yeah,
very hard.
A professional journalist. After I left the seminary, it took years to build up a career, and then, when I write books, they don't even get reviewed in the newspaper I used to be one of the editors of, Metro Daily and the Providence Journal.
Oh, exactly. So you know what it is. I mean, they just do not like this.
No,
they don't.
Which is why I also write history, just to hedge my bets. I have better luck with those. Anyway, I've had people tell me tell us that this has destroyed their lives completely, ruined marriages. I mean, certainly Larry Warren's story from the Rendlesham case, and we did 16 hours of specials on the air about the Rendlesham case with all the guys, and their stories have largely been negative, and certainly reflecting yours. But of course, you could make lemonade out of lemons, as they say, and one does try to do that. But there we are. So, Ben, why don't you continue?
So what has this done to your belief system?
Yeah, has the notion of God changed for you, or has there been...
Yeah, if you had any sort of belief system in the first place.
Well, in the sense everybody says it does different things. So what's it done for you, Tom?
Well, I can say that I certainly feel more in touch with what I believe to be the truth, opposed to those who donate every Sunday. That's not to say that I'm challenging the church or beliefs or what have you, but I think, again, that it's all in the way things were perceived, and I've certainly seen a side of things that many haven't, and then again, many have, but as far as do I, no, I haven't, nor do I attend any Sunday services, so I believe that, like we discussed earlier, I think that what happened is what we saw was an ancestor, and that's my feeling on it.
You mean an ancestor and not a descendant?
I
know what you mean. I guess. So some people would say,
right.
I'm thinking particularly of the experience of Jim Peniston, who has been talking about the binary code he received when he touched the craft, and he felt these were our descendants rather than ancestors. I don't know, but it seems to depend on the witness and
terminology,
the experiencer, Okay, Whitley?
Well, it has been a profound challenge to me. First of all, I grew up a Catholic, which automatically means a lot of Sturm and Drang. I mean, because Catholicism makes demands that are at the same that you can't really fulfill, but at the same time, it does not deserve the loyalty of the laity because of the historically terrible way the church has functioned, just generally. And yet, at the same time, it is an enormous charitable organization, has a great deal of good in it as well. So it's real hard, and there's a terrific conflict always involved there. But I was, in 1970, I became involved in the Gurdjieff Foundation. And G.I. Gurdjieff was an Armenian philosopher of the first half of the 20th century who felt that human beings were basically very mechanical in their approach to life, and that it was possible to wake up and to be much more vividly alive. And I had been working with that for a long, long time, for 15 years when this happened to me. And it made a great deal of what unfolded in my life symbolically and then ultimately in terms of the way the visitors engaged with me when I eventually managed to get that going after 6 months or so of trying, was very consistent with what I had learned in their Gurdjieff work and in other things I had done. So the result of all of this was that I ended up in what is a fairly unique position in that I know that the soul is real. Because of the way because of the experiences of life that have unfolded. However, what I don't know is whether or not it survives the body. So
we'll have to discuss that after we survive the break, I'm afraid. We have, we have a commercial break coming up here. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on CBS New Sky Radio, newskyradio.com, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Thursday is a power-packed day here on the Sky. Join us at noon for the I'm Thankful Network. At 1 p.m., it's the Dr. Pat Show. At 4 p.m., Colette Baron-Reed takes the stage for the Colette Baron-Reed Show. The Colette Baron-Reed Show, where intuition, practical spirituality, great advice, a little woo-woo fun, and fabulosity meet. Colette Baron-Reed is an internationally renowned intuitive counselor, educator, and best-selling author who helps others recognize and connect with their own intuition, potential, and purpose. Powerful motivational speaker, charismatic broadcast personality, and acclaimed performer, storyteller, and recording artist, Colette uses her extraordinary spiritual gifts to empower her clients to live a life that is awake and authentic, and to create a reality that is spiritual, deliberate, and meaningful. Call in early. The lines are hot. 248-545-7685. Instant feedback at newskyradio.com. New Sky Radio. newskyradio.com. New horizons, no boundaries. Powered by CBS, Yahoo, and radio.com.
Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. NewSkyRadio.com. Believe.
And we are back with our guests, Whitley Streiber and Thom Reed, and we're talking about their experiences of abduction. And before we go any further, and we've only got a few minutes left, I wanted to give you fellows a chance to talk about your books and your work. Whitley, I know you've written more books than Thom and I put together, so please tell us about your books and where people can find out more, your website, etc.
Well, I'll start at the beginning, tell you a little bit about each book, and we'll finish at 4 o'clock this morning. No, my website is unknowncountry.com. It offers daily news of the Edge, created by Ann Streiber, who is its editor, and the people who work with her. It has a subscriber section. It has a weekly radio show called Dreamland that's been on for 10 years that I inherited from Art Bell. Mm-hmm. Another program by a mythologist called William Henry and called Revelations is on weekly as well. So there's a lot to do on the site. The subscriber area offers Dreamlands back to 2004 and all kinds of special stuff. Plus, every year we have the Dreamland Festival. Now it's going to be May 18th to 20th this year, and you can sign up for that there if you'd like to, and see some of the people who we call the Dreamland team: Linda Moulton Howe, Jim Mars, and Marla Fries, and others. Nick Pope will be there this year. Mm-hmm. My new book is Solving the Communion Enigma. It's available for Kindle and Nook. It's in bookstores. I have my other more recent, slightly less recent book, The Key, is out there in bookstores as well, or you can get them from my website or practically anywhere, or anywhere else for that matter.
Well, Amazon is a sponsor of our Boston Providence show. I'll mention it tomorrow night then. Very good. And Thom, I know that you are up and coming in the paranormal universe here, and what are you working on?
Well, I'm trying to put together a book, a combined effort with several members of our family. Even my ex-wife is going to have a part in it. It's actually going to go back as far as 1954 and touch on the case with my mother at Moose Lake, which is not far from Gooseneck Lake over in Canada, where that airline in the fourth week of June had that fighter jet dispatch. So there might be some similarities there. So we're going to start in 54 and, of course, get very detailed in Sheffield, Massachusetts, those cases, and then, of course, the Brownsburg, Indiana case with my brother in 2009, where the anomalies in radiation and the magnetic fields are recorded. And then probably bring in the fact that, the political ties with my father and what happened there. And so it should be a very in-depth book. I'm not going to rush it. I'm shooting for the fall of this year.
Okay.
But it's going to be very clinical. And I'd say maybe half the book is going to be focused on the events itself. The rest of it's really going to be what happened around it.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, we'll be in touch with you, and we'll be keeping people updated on that and the work of both of you gentlemen. I want to thank you for being with us tonight. Sorry Travis couldn't join us, but I'd love to do this again because Ben and I have some experiences of our own.
See.
You don't realize this, Ben, but the same thing that's been happening to you happened to me Friday night.
Wait, what thing?
Well, we're out of time.
Oh.
We'll use that as a teaser.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
Discuss with you fellows.
Maybe then I'll find out.
And thank you very, very much, and we look forward to having you back again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, let's...
So many thanks to our producer, Will Cosmic, and we will see you next Sunday, March 4th, when my dad and I will return to the 1980 Rendlesham Forest UFO case. And we'll be back with Peter Robbins and Larry Warren for the first of 2 panel discussions leading up to the Rendlesham Conference 2012 in England in June.
And we're also going to have some news for you about our own speaking engagements, which seem to be multiplying rapidly. And we'll tell you about that next time.
Yes. So in the meantime, tune into our Boston Providence Drive Time show on WON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com at 6 p.m. Eastern Time every Monday. Don't forget, you can always get free podcasts of all our shows, along with show schedules and guest information at www.behindtheparanormal.com.
Okay. And again, we want to thank our guests, Thom Reed and Whitley Streiber, for a fascinating show this evening. We're certainly going to have them back and continue that discussion because we only got through about half the questions we had. In the meantime, we have to leave you now, and we'll do so with a thought from the great American author and philosopher Khalil Gibran. Quote, "The tragedy of life is not that it ends so soon, but that we wait so long to begin it." Unquote.
No truer words have been said. So thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we will see you next time.